Welcome to the New Life Church Letchworth podcast, where faith meets everyday life and hope is always within reach. We're so glad you're here. Each week we gather to grow, to learn, and to be inspired. And whether you're part of our church family or listening from afar, this space is for you. A place to be encouraged, challenged, and reminded that with Jesus, there is always a new beginning. So get ready, open your heart, lean in, and together let's discover a life worth living.
Well, here we are. Now, I just want to say a couple of things before I hand over to Wendy and Carlton. In this series, and it's been an absolute joy to hear all of the testimonies in this series that we're having, My Story, My Song. And the point about it is this, that, all of the testimonies we've heard, and I'm sure what we're going to hear today, are not stories about perfection. They're stories about real life. And our lives don't run, in our walk with God, our lives don't run necessarily in a straight line. There's ups and downs, and there's going around in circles and all sorts of things. And to hear folks' testimonies really illustrates what life is like in Jesus. And I think that is just so encouraging. It really is. It's just wonderful. So, we know that God is at work in people's lives. And I know what we're going to hear this morning from Wendy and Carlton is going to express exactly that. There's a scripture, he puts a new song in my mouth, a hymn of praise to our God. So as we hear these stories, as we hear these testimonies, they sort of point to a song, and that song then glorifies God for all the things that he's doing in our lives. So, that is a pretty amazing thing, isn't it? God is at work in our lives. Jesus is real. He leads us, he takes us through things, he stands with us as we go through the fires and as we go through the good times as well. So without any further ado, let me hand over to Wendy and Carlton to hear what they've got to say.
Ooh, thank you very much. Thank you. It's a bit odd being this side of the audience, I have to say. But a quick word of thanks first. So many people have prayed for us this morning and during the week that we're not too nervous and that we get all our words out correctly. And having listened to the worship, that some of the lines in those songs just so interweave with what we've got to say to you this morning. So thank you very much for that.
Yes, I agree with everything Wendy said. And before we get underway, I'd just like to reassure you, you're not here for a recording of Gardener's Question Time.
Okay.
Wendy.
So the title of our testimony is God Changed Everything Again. So we came to faith in 2003 after being encouraged to attend Christianity Explored, which is a short sort of alpha course. And of course, God changed everything for us at that moment. Why then? Well, a very good friend of ours, a Christian who Carlton had known for over 20 years, lost his wife before her 40th birthday to ovarian cancer after a very short illness. We were amazed by the resilience that he showed and his hope for the future. He was convinced that this had all happened for a reason, which one day he would have revealed to him when he was reunited with his wife in glory. This was in stark contrast at that time for us, because Carlton's feelings were really, really down. He'd just been made redundant after his employer had closed down the company that he worked for. So this was a difficult time for both of us, but nothing like as difficult as the issues our good friend was having with a young family to face on his own.
In the following months, I began doing some voluntary work before starting to look for paid employment. But as time went on, we felt that this was what God wanted for us long term. he changed everything again. So it was Wendy in paid work to cover the bills and me in voluntary work for our church and community. Fast forward 11 years, and Wendy was still working in the law, and I'd continued to contribute in different ways through several roles with Samaritans, a local Christian debt advice centre, Citizens Advice, a Christian food bank, and our church council at the time. We'd both helped our church plant another one to run on Sunday afternoons when there were less children's sporting activities going on, and we became members of the catering team for events, and I was a regular weekday volunteer at the church cafe that was open 5 days a week. But then God changed everything again. In the spring of 2014, I saw a TV documentary about the preparations for that year's World Cup in Brazil. As usual, this was going to be an opportunity for the host nation to showcase itself and its facilities. But this TV programme told the story of what went on behind the glittering facade that was on display to the world, the luxury hotels, the fancy stadiums. And combined with further research, I got a much better understanding of the level of corruption that was going on and the cost of this huge building projects, not just financially, but in human terms. The extent of the suffering of many people evicted from the slums or the favelas really resonated with us in a way that we hadn't previously felt about an appeal or crisis unfolding in the news. Now, to give this some context, in Rio de Janeiro alone, it's estimated that 22,000 families were forcibly removed or had the land on which their homes were built seized by the government between 2009 and 2015 in preparation for the World Cup and 2016 Rio Olympics.
So we'd sat through Live Aid, Comic Relief and other appeals over the years, which showed in more detail some of the issues that people face. And we had responded, as many of us do. But this was different. We felt sad, angry, frustrated about what the government was doing to its own people, just like they didn't matter. And we realised that God's heart was breaking, and he was putting that situation on us and breaking our hearts for that situation as well. So we had to do something, not just make a donation over the phone or online.
We started searching online for opportunities to volunteer in Brazil, short-term ones because of Wendy's holiday entitlements, but they were not that easy to find. If you were a nurse, a medic, accountant or architect and had 3 or 6 months to spare, there were opportunities. But eventually we found an organisation that arranged 2-week mission trips to visit different countries, including Brazil. Volunteers travelled in teams, working to a fixed timetable, with time on the building site in the morning and then visiting different projects, mostly Christian, around that area in the afternoon. This helped volunteers gain a broader view and some understanding of what life was like for ordinary folk in Brazil. The project was in an area called Campo Largo, just outside the southern city of Curitiba, which is where our friend Mr. Della was born.
Considering going on a mission trip was something we prayed really hard about. Carlton felt a serious prompting from God to go and do something to help. In the end, I was not able to travel out with Carlton in 2014, and so this brought more worries and anxiety for us. We'd never spent 2 weeks apart before, let alone been in a different country apart from on a package holiday. So we prayed through all the practicalities, and God made a way. Whilst Carlton was away, we were able to catch up every day by phone or email, the time difference just being perfect in fitting in with what he was doing and what I was doing during the day. And I naturally became part of the preparations for the trip ahead, including attending the introduction briefing day before he departed. So that year, Carlton was part of a team which helped complete a project building 3 large bungalows for a small orphanage. Because the project was a local Brazilian project, not something with a British charity name above the door, the funds were very limited, so volunteers raised funds to pay for the materials they used when they worked on site.
But not only had God placed a situation of so many displaced Brazilians on our hearts in a way that we had to respond, he did more. The local pastor, Pastor Andre, and his wife Claudia, who were the liaison in Brazil between the British volunteer teams and the orphanage, also introduced us to their amazingly hospitable family, who all shared the most incredible faith and love of God. The teams visited their church on the Sunday evenings when we were in country, and I have to say I'd never seen such exuberance at any church service I'd ever attended before. I came back from Brazil 2 weeks later saying two things to everyone I met. Well, three actually. Two was, my spiritual batteries have been supercharged. When can I return to Brazil? Secondly, when can I return to Brazil? But seriously, we really don't know how lucky we are. And I said that to so many people. Lived examples of God's love and grace were everywhere, though, both in the way people involved in these different projects behaved, how they lived out their faith every day, and were so willing to share the faith that they were so passionate about.
So Carlton and the other volunteers naturally returned to the same area in 2015, but the project had finished that he'd worked on the year before. So they started a new project, run again by the pastor that he'd met the previous year. God had spoken to Pastor Andre's father-in-law, Samuel, about the significance of loving thy neighbour, Matthew 22, verse 39. Samuel and his wife Cedar had led a fascinating and varied life in Brazil, but had also spent several years working at YWAM, Youth with a Mission in Harpenden. As before, all the volunteers were asked to raise money for building materials as well as to cover their travel and accommodation costs. Samuel shared his inspirational testimony with each team on the first day on site. So Carlton had probably heard his testimony over the years at least 10 times, but never tired of hearing the message.
In a nutshell, the plan was to build 8 transitional homes, 3-bed bungalows with a bathroom and a kitchen lounge, a shared community centre in the middle of the project, and being Brazil, a football pitch. The land had been donated by the local council, and the idea was to give the opportunity for 8 families to move out of the favelas to live in a safe, clean environment for up to 5 years, where they would be supported to bring up their children away from the influence of local drug gangs and in better, more sanitary conditions, regularly attending church and encouraged to go to school. And you should have a picture on the screen now of the, there we go, that's an architect's impression of the project that we first saw in 2015. Now, in the favelas, there are many women bringing up families on their own, and for the men and women who live together, many are not married. So this was the first requirement for potential tenants: formalise your relationship, provide a stable family home, and get married if you're not married already. The church arranged marriage courses to help them, and it also intended to run, and does run to this day, Bible studies and health courses on site, and encourages residents to attend church. During the 5 years that families are living there, they are required to pay some rent, some of which covers communal running costs of the facilities, but most of it was put aside for them. And at the end of 5 years, or sooner if they've had an opportunity to move, the money is returned to them as a deposit on their next home. So I referred to these houses earlier as transitional, and that's the beauty of them. After 5 years, a family can move on. They've been helped, hopefully. They've got some money to put down on the next property. The home can be redecorated, tidied up, and then another family can move in and the whole process starts again.
So this project really pulled me in. For those of you who don't know, I'm a solicitor, have always worked advising housing associations in acquiring land for redevelopment and construction of new affordable housing. So what was there not to like about this project? So God wouldn't give up. Opportunities and encouragement to grow spiritually just continue to open up for us in Brazil. We really felt him wanting us to do something for these people, for this project. So in 2016, I was really fortunate to be able to take a sabbatical from work, and we travelled out together for the first time. So we had 5 weeks at the same project with more volunteers, now both as leaders of those volunteer teams. Carlton returned 3 years in a row as manager, and I went out a couple more times in that period up to 2019. We were fundraising each time, and luckily, we prayed that the money would come in. Nothing got done on these projects when we weren't in country. We arrived, money was there, materials had been bought. We did what was required of us in the time that we had. So each day on site started with a devotion and a worship, and after supper, we closed the day with a reflection. Now, this was something that we'd never, ever done before. First time, what do we say? We had volunteers who were Christians and non-Christians. So we prayed, and God answered our prayers. And every morning he revealed to us an inspirational and encouraging verse and song to share with the volunteers. Very few of the volunteers had practical building experience, although that wasn't really the point. God ensured that the combination of our willingness and our enthusiasm, combined with the help of 1 or 2 local builders on site, all supervised by Samuel, got the job done. So we shifted bricks. Unfortunately, we don't have any bricks with us today. We mixed concrete for foundations, hence the reference in the song earlier. We shifted bricks. We mixed mortar for brick walls. Luckily, there was a concrete mixer on site. We shifted bricks. We built brick walls. We painted and plastered walls. We shifted bricks. We grouted floor and wall tiles and varnished the beautiful wooden front doors that Samuel had managed to obtain from his many contracts in the area. And in all of that time, God kept every single member of the team safe. Not one person was hospitalised as a result of a worksite injury, bearing in mind health and safety, very different out there as opposed to here.
Volunteer ages range from 14 to 75, some with pre-existing conditions, and from time to time we all needed supporting in different ways and encouraging, as well as 1 or 2 folk needing some pastoral support. But with the practical help of Pastor Andre and family and many prayers, we were able to overcome all the bumps and potholes along the road. I should perhaps bring the team to this country and deal with some of the potholes. But anyway.
Yeah.
Now, one of my memories is sat at Curitiba Airport with a group of volunteers who were waiting for their flight home. Because basically what we would do, we'd be out there for a few days prepping. A team would come out for 2 weeks. We'd see them back on the plane, and then a week later another team would come out. So I was sat at Curitiba Airport with a group of volunteers waiting for their flight home. And the conversation turned to, what are you most looking forward to when you get home? And typical replies were seeing my family, catching up with my dog, telling people about the amazing time I've had in Brazil. And then one amazing lady in her 70s, after working on the building site for almost 2 weeks, looked up and said, I'm hoping to open a letter from my specialist confirming the date of my hip replacement operation. Now, we were due to finish the project in 2020, but COVID intervened. However, we helped coordinate fundraising efforts by previous volunteers who'd worked on the project. And thanks be to God, enough money was raised to pay local builders, project managed by Samuel, to complete the work.
So we weren't only drawn to Campo Largo. The charity that we went out with also did trips to Rio de Janeiro. So in 2015 and 2019, Carlton helped lead teams of volunteers to go there instead. And I joined one of the teams as a volunteer in 2019. The work there was to convert an old church into a Christian community centre to be run by a local church. However, this was a really different experience. This was working in the middle of a police no-go area in the slums, but it had the blessing of the local drug gangs. In fact, the leader of the drug gang actually sent his children to the place that we were creating to be run by the local church, so they supported it. But it was a real eye-opener and very, very different from the more rural setting of Campo Largo and the project that we've been there. So we were very fortunate last year to go back to Brazil and stayed with Pastor Andre and his family. And we visited the original project again. It is still going strong with new families now in residence, several of whom now attend the local church run by Pastor Andre. So we have a very short video for you to watch here.
Yeah, so the eight houses are on the left there, and when we first moved there, that was just a field, basically, or when we started work. So that's 5 and 6, 7 and 8, and the building at the bottom's the community centre.
The football pitch is off to the right.
In the corner, yep. And there's Wendy, and there's Pastor Andre, and there's Samuel. Thank you. Great. Thanks, Joel. There are many stories we could share where God answered prayers for resources and support while we were on site. Thanks, guys. It's great. I'll never forget when we were all grumbling about trying to shift a lot of material one day for the road surface inside the project and struggling to get the land level. And all of a sudden, the JCB came chugging down the road. The local council were doing roadworks nearby, and the foreman was a friend of Samuel's, and he just sent this JCB along to us for an hour in case it might be useful. What an answer to prayer.
And what a joy it was to see somebody holding up the electricity cable whilst it negotiated its way onto site and off again. That was a bit of a health and safety worry, I have to say.
It wasn't one of the volunteers, I hasten to add. It was somebody local.
Luckily, we were mostly wearing rubber boots. So another lasting memory was during the construction of the outer walls of each of the 8 bungalows, we would stop and bless the building. Each volunteer, as I say, Christian and non-Christian, would write a verse or two or put together a poem or a favourite saying on a piece of paper. We would share each of those that had been chosen with everybody in the team, the local builders, etc. And then we would put those messages into a small plastic bag, and they would go inside the bricks, making up the walls, and then they were bricked over. And we would bless and pray the protection over those families that were going to live there. So all of those little messages are in those houses and will remain until the houses come down.
Some of the friendships we made during these years with people in Brazil are still going strong today, thanks to WhatsApp and Facebook. And it was great to meet up with some again last year. We also got to know quite well some of the projects that we took the teams to visit. If you remember, I said we did building work in the morning and then we went to projects in the afternoon. These included a church service and meal for homeless folk in downtown Curitiba, an adult drug rehab facility, a refuge for women and babies, and especially some of the children's after-school clubs. And these were really special, as going year on year, we got to see some of the children growing and developing. We were told it meant a lot to the children to see some familiar faces coming back each year to check on them. We weren't just on a flyby, some tourists coming to visit poor people. In many of the after-school clubs we visited, we played football, we played frisbee, and various games with a very, very hard-wearing parachute. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. Now, often the boys, this is something that I got confused about, often the boys, typically 9 and 10, only wanted to talk about the weather. And I thought, that's strange, I thought. But in soccer-mad Brazil, when you only speak a smattering of English and have a very strong accent, Harry Kane can sound very much like hurricane.
At each of the projects, we had a Q&A session with either the children or the people in attendance, and it was a real eye-opener to see what life was doing for them. And there was always a Christian element to all of the projects that we visited. And so we were trying to encourage them as much as they were trying to encourage us. And God was really good in that he sent us particular volunteers that seemed to resonate in their stories with the people we were actually doing those Q&As with. So for instance, one volunteer, she worked in a local prison. And when we went to the drug rehabilitation centre, there were ex-cons there who were being brought through the detox process and to Christ. And she just had so much more knowledge of what it was like to be in jail, basically. So that was really a blessing for us.
Jane, one of the leaders on my first visit to Brazil, introduced us to the song we will be playing for you shortly. Now, sometimes as Christians, we aren't as direct as we could be. And we both like this song because it says it how it is. Or to use a building site analogy, calls a spade a spade. There's nothing fancy, no debating of theological argument, no beating about the bush. It's also a reminder that while prayer is vital, just as vital as listening for God's response, we have all been given gifts by God. After all, we are made in his image, and he expects us to use those gifts.
So last Monday, we were blessed to meet up again with Samuel and Cedar as they've come to the UK for a few weeks to reconnect with many of the friends that they've made at YWAM, and also to meet some of the volunteers that have travelled out to the project. So one of the things I remember from last Monday was Samuel talked to us as we sat there having coffee, Matthew 22, verse 39, love thy neighbour. What a timely reminder that was that they were in country to bring that message back to us again today. So here's a picture of Samuel, the man with the perfect teeth, who would also say, very professional job.
Very professional.
Very
yes.
professional, yes.
So we would encourage you to do something. If you feel God is calling you to do something, why aren't you doing it? Don't prevaricate. Don't think up all the negatives about the idea. Use the gifts God has given you. Trust in him. Rely on your faith. Yes, it takes courage. It involves a risk. You might be fearful, but God can make it happen.
So, of course, travelling overseas is not possible for everyone due to family, cost, time constraints. Just depends where you are in your life. But there are so many things that you can do closer to home. And the message is simple. We need to do something. We need to be called into action. It doesn't have to be building work. Here at New Life, it could be helping with setup, children's work, joining the hospitality team. Sometimes the problems and issues and just day-to-day life can feel overwhelming, but that isn't a reason for not doing something. Something simple can make a real difference in somebody's life.
If you've been praying or feel called to do something, do it. By all means, chat to Beth and David today to share your thoughts and discuss options available to you. Anything you can do will make a difference. And don't undervalue what impact your contribution can have, or use this as an excuse to do nothing. Not only will you be helping others to change their lives, God will use these experiences to change yours. Certainly our time serving in Brazil changed our lives forever. So in closing, we'd like to remind you of that famous story of the little boy who visited the beach with his grandma after a heavy overnight storm. As they walked onto the beach, it was just covered in starfish. As far as the eye could see, all washed up on the beach as a result of the storm. The little boy let go of his grandma's hand, ran down to the beach to the water's edge and started picking up the starfish and throwing them back into the sea. "What are you doing?" asked his grandma. "There's so many of them. What's the point? Let's go home." "No, Grandma," said the little boy. "I helped that one. And I helped that one." So we'd like to play you Do Something by Matthew West.
Wow. What an inspiration you are. What an inspiration you are. Thank you. Isn't that amazing? Can we give another round of applause? Oh. Isn't it great? I mean, you know, sometimes we can be inclined to think about church in terms of coming here on a Sunday morning in these four walls and just getting together and singing worship songs. But actually, God is calling us to something so much greater. And, you've really inspired that in us today. So, let's seek the Lord for what he wants us to do, because we've all been given gifts. We've all been given abilities, and we can help each other, and we can help those in the wider community, those, in need, those overseas. It's just amazing what God will do with us if we give him a chance. So thank you. That is absolutely excellent. Now, this has been a brilliant series, hasn't it? This absolutely amazing. And I just think it's inspirational from everybody that we've heard from, their stories of their lives, of how God has done so much. And I hope particularly, for you younger guys, you just sort of get an impression that God is not going to leave you to just muddle through this life. He's going to be with you every step you take. So that's wonderful. Now, we've got a bit of time before the children need to be collected from over the road. So let's get together and chat and have another drink. I would like to mention a couple of things that Wendy and Carlton just touched on. In their work in Brazil, they came across violence, gang-related incidents, misuse of drugs, that sort of thing. If anybody's been affected by that sort of thing or is in a difficult situation with that, come and find us afterwards, and we can pray together, we can chat together. We're going to be around for a while at the back there, so feel free to come and chat and pray. And as has already been said, if you feel that you want to contribute, to join a team, to help with, teas, coffees, putting things out, whatever, please come and chat to us, because we're always in need of extra help. And in fact, on that note, we're a bit low on people to put things away today. So if anybody's feeling strong and able, if we could stack chairs and do stuff like that. And there's a wheelbarrow. So that's lovely. Well, have a blessed week. We've had a wonderful time together. And next week, let's come full of anticipation, full of prayerfulness, baptisms. Whoa, and, we're going to have a wonderful time. So thank you, everybody. Bless you. And thank you, Lord. Amen.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this week's message. We hope you found it encouraging. Remember, no matter where you are on your faith journey, you are never alone. God is with you, and we are here for you too. If this message spoke to you, please share it with a friend, and don't forget to connect with us online or in person. You can find out more about New Life Church at nlcletchworth.co.uk. We'd love to see you soon. Until next time, keep walking in faith, living in hope, and loving like Jesus.